Prosecutor, he is the one who starts the case.
Inevitably, the blame goes to the judiciary.
Location, location, and location. What is it today?
They're going to suffer.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Headlines, your one-stop for all the stories that made the headlines and more. I'm Hazwin Hassan, and this week we're going to go over some of the points raised by the Chief Justice, Tun Tengku Maimun Tuan Mat, at the opening of the legal year just on Monday. In her address, she remarked that the judiciary has been made the scapegoat for decisions by the Attorney General and public prosecutors to withdraw criminal charges against high-profile individuals, most notably politicians, in some recent cases. Making a clear distinction between the judiciary and the prosecution, Tun Tengku Maimun says that such suggestions and insinuations erode judicial independence and undermine public confidence in the judiciary. And in the second half of this two-part episode, we'll be looking at the property market outlook for this year, where I'll be joined by Business Times editor Sharon Kaur. But that's for a little later. With me now, I have our very own New Straits Times executive editor, Sharanjit Singh. Sharanjit, welcome to the show, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure to have you. And to help discuss Malaysia's judiciary and the Chief Justice's recent address is our special guest for today, Datuk Sri Dr. Jahabudin Muhammad Yunus, a senior lawyer with Messrs. Jahabudin & Co. and a regular columnist. Datuk Sri Dr. Jahabudin is also founder of Rapira, a movement which encourages thinking and compassionate citizens. Datuk Sri, welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you, Hazwin, for the invitation.
Pleasure to have you on our couch today with Sharanjit. Now, let's first try and understand where all this backlash against the judiciary is coming from. Are there certain quarters out there out to get the judiciary? Based on the Chief Justice's remarks, why are they being targeted? Datuk.
Okay. Well, Hazwin, I don't think it's a question of planned targeting against judiciary. I think it's probably due to the lack of understanding between what is the function of the prosecution and the judiciary. So I think that's largely what's happening in society today. And the other thing we notice is because most of the cases that results in the so-called unfounded attacks against judiciary arises from political cases. So as our CJ, Tengku Maimun, pointed out, there's a big difference between the prosecution and the judiciary. Now, when we speak about the judiciary, we are talking about the courts, basically. We're talking about the judges.
Yes.
And the manner in which the judges function, for the sake of the hearers, is that a case is presented in the court. A person is charged in court, for example, and the person pleads guilty or not guilty. And then the judge sits as a referee. He's listening for the first time to all the evidence adduced by the prosecution and whatever evidence subsequently adduced by the defense.
Right.
So the role of the judge is to listen to the case, to look at the evidence, weigh the evidence, and decide based on the materials before him, before the court, as to whether or not the person is guilty or not guilty. That's all he does. So his entire role in the court, a judge, the entire role of the judiciary is merely to adjudicate on the case and the evidence presented before him, and to see whether the prosecution has proved the case against the accused. That's all that the judiciary do. Now, beyond that, the judiciary is bound. If the evidence shows they're guilty, then the judiciary is bound to say they're guilty. If not guilty, they're bound to say not guilty. Of course, as we know, in the real world, not everybody is happy with the decisions, especially when it concerns political accused in the court. Now, on the other hand, the prosecution's role is completely different. Now, the prosecution's role is governed by Article 145 sub 3 of the Constitution. And it's very clear. Article 145 sub 3 says three things. One is the prosecution, they have the sole discretion to institute, to conduct, and to discontinue. These are three different roles. Right. Now, what it means, if I may, what it means is that the prosecutor, he is the one who starts the case, institute, meaning what charges to proffer, how many charges to proffer. For example, you may have, for instance, a person being charged with theft under Section 420 of the CPC. Now, you steal the money, that's one offence. Now, the prosecution may say that, look, he's using the money which is as a result of stealing. Now, that is money laundering. because you're using the money from illegal activities. So the prosecution may or may not decide to charge money laundering as well. So in short, what happens is it is up to the prosecution how he wants to institute, what kind of charges he wants to prefer, and that is his role as far as institution is concerned.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Now the second one is conducting the trial itself. It's up to the prosecution. How many witnesses he wants to call, who are the witnesses they want to call, what kind of evidence he wants to adduce, what are the documents you have to put in court. So the entire manner in which the prosecutor wants to conduct his prosecution is completely up to him. And the third aspect is whether or not to discontinue the proceedings. Now we must remember that it is the prosecution that starts the proceeding by charging the person in court. All right. Now, if the prosecution just allows the trial to proceed right to the end of the defense or right to the end of the prosecution case, then you find that it goes right to the end. But in between, at any stage of the proceeding, the prosecution may decide for various reasons not to continue with the charge anymore, not to continue with the proceeding anymore. Now, this is something that the public must understand. Under Article 453 of the Federal Constitution, the prosecution has the discretion not to continue the proceeding at any stage of the trial. Now, any stage of the trial would mean at the prosecution stage or at the defense stage. This is the matter I notice in public. People get upset and say, hey, why the case already started? Why are they discontinuing? Now, there could be many, many reasons. Now, one of the reasons I can give you is this. Now, something I practice criminal law as well.
Right.
So I may have a client that I may be representing in the court, and after a while, I discover certain evidence which I think the prosecution may not have. So I write a letter of representation to the Attorney General's chambers to say that, look, these are the things that we have, or we may make an offer to the Attorney General's chambers. Instead of you proceeding with a complete trial, let's come to an agreement that we will return certain amount of money, etc., or we will do certain things and so on. And the Attorney General chambers will see whether or not it is in the public interest to proceed with the trial or to come to a settlement.
Right.
Right. So that are matters which are within the discretion of the Attorney General. So when the Attorney General decides that they want to withdraw the charge, for example, so what do? They go to the court and they inform the judge that, Ya Arif, we have instructions to withdraw charges against the accused. Now, what option does the judge have? What option does the judiciary have? Now, they are governed by Section 254 of the Criminal Procedure Code. It's another act, another law, which clearly provides what the judge can do. And this may come as a shocker to many members of the public, not to lawyers, to the public, that when the prosecutor goes to the court to say that we want to discontinue proceedings, Section 254 of the Criminal Procedure Code actually gives very limited options to the judge. The judge can discharge the accused, meaning he says, look, we don't proceed anymore. Shall discharge the accused. And the judge may, if he wants, to say that discharge and acquit the accused. But ordinarily, it is discharge. And we, the defense, always say that it's better for the judge to not only discharge but also acquit. Because why do you want to have a charge? Because there are two different things, just to explain. Yeah? You have discharge amounting to an acquittal,
And a complete
and the other one you
acquittal.
have DNAA, which is discharge not amounting to an acquittal.
Okay.
When you say DNAA, discharge not amounting to an acquittal, that means if you are DNAA, discharge not amounting to an acquittal, you can be recharged again at some future date.
Is there a statute of limitation on that?
No. Criminal law has got no statute limitation. That's another interesting point that you raised. Now, you could have committed an offense, in theory, 100 years ago. And if it was an offense then, you can still be charged today. There is no statute of limitations. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, you commit an offense, it was an offense, you can still be charged 20 years later or 30 years later. That is why, if the accused is given a DNAA, discharge not amounting to an acquittal, we defense lawyers say that it is more just and fair that the accused should be given a discharge amounting to an acquittal. Otherwise, for the rest of his life, on his record, when he goes for an interview, when he takes a flight, on the system it shows that he can be recharged. Because DNAA means you can be recharged, charged again.
I guess perhaps, with this because of the recent dropping of the charges against prominent persons, there seems to be this understanding, and I think it's more of a uninformed understanding that the judiciary somehow has played a part in dropping the cases, when obviously that's not how it works. In fact, we have, it's pretty much part of our constitution that we should have the separation of powers. The AG falls under the executive. The judiciary is a branch of the government on its own. But now coming back to this, the backlash that they've received, clearly, and to the point that it has prompted the Chief Justice to come to the defense of the judiciary. Do you think this says more about the public, that they're pretty much naive or unlearned when it comes to the rule of law? Or is this more reflective of, as I said earlier, the pattern that we're seeing of prominent persons having DNAs or even being acquitted? But that's obviously the decision from the courts. But yes, we've had recent DNAs. So which one is it? Does it reflect badly for the judiciary, or more because perhaps people are not as informed?
Now, I'm personally very happy as a lawyer and a citizen that our Chief Justice, Yang Arif Tengku Maimun, has come out to explain this. Because I've also personally written several articles over the past 10 years, actually, Hazwin,
Right.
on the distinction between the powers of the judiciary and the powers of the prosecution. Now, largely, you find that this kind of unfounded comments and attacks against judiciary comes mostly from the political cyber troopers. Now, this is where I've always advocated that while I advocate freedom of speech, I also feel that the institution ought to be protected, whether it's the Attorney General Chambers or the judiciary. They need to be protected. Why I say that? Because we cannot have the public confidence in these institutions being eroded. So I would propose one step further, that if there are unfounded attacks, consistent unfounded attacks against the judiciary or even the AGC, legal action must be taken against these people. Because we should be able to educate the public that while there is, especially the political public, especially the public that is very political, we have to educate them that while there's freedom of speech, there's also a responsibility as a citizen to safeguard and protect the reputation of the institution. That's number one. Number two, I also find it very disappointing. We all forget, Hazwin, that those politicians are also, some of them, are also members of parliament. What does members of parliament mean? Members of parliament mean they are lawmakers. Now, why can't these lawmakers be responsible and understand the law and explain the law to the public? Now, the judiciary is not able to go out to speak. That's why Tengku Maimun, as CEO, as manager of the judiciary, has got to explain on behalf of the entire judiciary. But I'm saying that the onus also falls on the lawmakers, the members of parliament. Wake up. You are lawmakers. You're not just the traditional understanding of wakil rakyat. So since you are a lawmaker, it is your responsibility also to make sure that your supporters are not sprouting nonsense in public. So that's one. Now, the other thing is, which is very important I need to mention here, is that if you look at the discretion of the Attorney General, of course there's a certain school of thought there.
Right.
Now, if you look at the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, you're talking about during the 1970s, if I'm not mistaken, was Lord President Tun Sufyan.
Okay. And
And then you had 1980s Lord President Tun Saleh Abbas. And then 1990s was Lord President Justice, I think Hamid Omar, Abdul Hamid Omar, yes.
Okay.
Now, the discussion then on the discretion of the Attorney General was that 1970, 1930, that the feeling that you get is the federal courts of the view that discretion of the Attorney General is exclusive. It is unfettered. It is completely, absolute, almost absolute, that you cannot question him. If I'm not mistaken, I think Lord President Saleh Abbas also said that you cannot even bring a judicial review. Now, the position seemed to be a little bit different in the 20s with Tengku Maimun, for example. In a judgment, and I agree with her, where she said that there's no such thing as unfettered discretion. Now, I don't really remember, we had a Lord President called Raja Azlan Shah, who became later the Sultan of Perak,
Right.
a very brilliant Lord President.
Okay.
Now he said that if you have unfettered discretion, that is a contradiction in law. His argument was, his observation was that everybody must be subject to the rule of law. There cannot be absolute discretion. So that's a new thinking in the law, and I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
So to that extent, if I'm not mistaken, Tunku Maimun did say in a certain case where the discretion of the Attorney General can be judicially reviewed in appropriate circumstances, in certain circumstances, which I think is more proper. Because we must also remember that there's a cause of action called malicious prosecution. Say, for example, you are prosecuted and you feel that you're wrongly prosecuted and you feel that they prosecuted you for malafide reasons, for bad faith and so on and so forth. Now the law allows you to sue the Attorney General Chambers for malicious prosecution. It's happened in this country for years. So there's an avenue by which you can do that.
Right.
So to me, if you're able to have a suit for malicious prosecution, that means to say that the prosecution itself, the decision to prosecute itself can be questioned. Therefore, there are appropriate circumstances in which the discretion of the AG to prosecute can be questioned. Now, by that token, if the decision to prosecute can be questioned, the new question would be, what about the decision to withdraw?
Right.
Because it's the other side of the mirror. So that's a debate that I think is going on, and probably that may be questioned very soon in the federal court.
But certainly, and I think Sharanjit, I think you can jump in on this. They've received the AG and the AGC, the AGC's office, sorry, the AG's office or the AGC. They've received criticism for responding that way, saying that we have discretion over discharging and dropping cases, saying that it is well within the bounds of the Constitution. But recently, Lawyers for Liberty, they've come out and say, well, because discretion is unfettered. Right, Sharanjit? Yeah.
Well, if you look at the criticism being leveled at the decisions to drop charges, you will see that the public is outraged. They want to know why decisions were taken to drop charges. If you look back, what happened a few years ago, when the previous Attorney General dropped charges against some high-profile cases involving the Chief Minister of Penang, it was Lim Guan Eng, and the LTTE,
Okay.
the 12 suspects in the LTTE case.
Right.
The charges against them were dropped. And the Attorney General then issued a statement to explain why he decided to drop those charges to appease the public. Now, if you have a situation where the Attorney General's chamber says that he doesn't need to give any reason, then people can assume that there were no reasons for him to drop the charges in the first place.
Right.
You know, if you don't want to give reasons, perhaps you didn't have any reasons to drop it. So the outcry is, of course, something that in this age of credibility and accountability, you need to live up to that. And as Lawyers for Liberty said, in a democracy, that is expected. Otherwise, you are heading toward despotism.
Correct. Yeah.
If I can continue from where
Sure, Dato',
Shari is
please.
saying,
Yeah.
I see two things there. One is the law as it is interpreted today, meaning in terms of discretion, it appears to be that the discretion of the AG is unfettered. It appears to be. That even though, as I said earlier, there is a judgment which says that it is not completely, where the discretion can be questioned. But it has not been solidified, crystallized in this country, for sure, that the discretion of the AG can be questioned in appropriate circumstances. Okay, it's not sure. Though I'm in favor of any discretion, it must be able to be subject to the rule of law. It must be subject to scrutiny and so on. That's one aspect. But what I'm trying to say here is, as Charanjit pointed out, before I go to what Charanjit pointed out, in the court every day for the past 50 years, it is very common for DNA and DAA. It's very common. It is very common for charges to be withdrawn and so on. To us lawyers, it's very common. Now, why does this outcry come about? You must understand the context and the reason for the outcry. As Charlie pointed out, these are high-profile cases. This concerns people where the public's watching. So when it comes to such cases, I would say that quite apart from the statement of the law, it is incumbent, it is ethically incumbent upon the AGC's office to explain to the public why a certain course of action is taken, even though we can take the position that it is not necessarily not required under the law to explain to you. Yes, correct.
Right.
But nevertheless, what is your motive in explaining? Two reasons. Reason number one is you do not want the judiciary to be blamed for nothing.
Correct.
And secondly, you want to rest assure the public that, hey, we did not nilly-willy drop the charges. We had reasons for which we had to drop the charges. We had probably public interest. So this kind of explanation is how I say that while there's a rule of law, there's also how you manage the rule of law. And this management of the rule of law, to me, falls on the shoulders of people like Tunku Maimun, the CJ, for her judiciary,
Right.
people like the AG for the AGC, people like the head of SPRM, for example, head of customs, meaning head of each of these institutions. There are certain occasions, certain moments where they have to come out to the public, explain, and bring forth confidence back from the public. That look, we are acting in accordance with the law, and we're explaining the reasons even though we don't have to.
You know, further to that, you know, if we look at all these cases that get entangled in this kind of situations, there's a lot of hype that is built up to the case. Then you have the publicity generated into the story involving this particular individual or these high-profile cases. Then you go through the entire process of coming to the courts with this and that allegations, very strong allegations. You build up the hype. You know, people have got so much of expectation.
Right.
Then at the height of it all, you just dropped it like that. Of course, people are going to start wondering, is this a kangaroo court? And inevitably, the blame goes to the judiciary.
Judiciary.
Which
Whereas
is unfair.
they have got no say in decisions to drop the charges and so on, you know.
Can the judiciary then make it clearer that, hey, if there's anyone you want to point fingers at, it should be the prosecution? Like, if you want to start questioning, question the people charging the body or the entity charging the accused individual.
No, I
Can she
think
make
what-
that clearer at least? I mean,
Well-
I feel like as if that's what she's insinuating.
No, I
through-
think
yeah.
I think the CJ Tunku Maimun has made it very clear this time around.
Correct,
She has made
yeah.
it very, very crystal clear that judiciary's function is this, prosecution is this. What she's saying, if I understand it correctly, what she's saying is, hey, we are judiciary. We're generally supposed to remain silent, not get involved in publicity,
Yeah.
not get involved in these cross exchanges and so on and so forth. That's good because we need to maintain that. So other people should assist her, assist the judiciary. Meaning, public should assist the judiciary in explaining it. The lawmakers, the members of parliament should assist, and so on and so forth. Now, Hazwin, in this context, Hazwin, there's a bigger implication that I'm concerned about in this country. What I'm concerned about in this
Right.
country is, where, for example, recently you have charges of a certain high-profile person dropped, yeah, and he was DNAA. That's okay. I'm not questioning that. I'm questioning now the allegations against that. The allegation against that, how you see, it is interference by the judiciary. It's interference by the prosecution. These all politicized. So the impression people get in this country is that politicians can control the judiciary, can control the Attorney General's chambers, can control the SPRM.
Right.
Now this is bad for the country. Absolutely bad for the country. So what I'm saying is such allegations must stop. And how do you stop them? Number one, it's a very good thing that CJ came out to explain it. Number two, the AGC probably must have a PR exercise. You've got to start doing that as well. Probably all our agencies should now embrace the new change in this world. You know, the world today no longer accepts a statement from an authority just like that.
Right.
Especially the younger generation, they want to know, why do you do that?
Yeah.
Who are you? You
You
know,
know-
so that's important, and that's something that's still lacking in this country because we are still stuck. I'm sorry to say, we are still stuck in a very feudal mindset. You are the authority, and therefore I was supposed to come there and kowtow to you.
Right.
It's no longer the case.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
So I think I hope that Tengku Maimun has paved the way in this regard, quite apart from explaining on behalf of the judiciary what is the difference between prosecution and the judiciary.
You know, I had a very interesting chat with Dato' Jahabuddin earlier. You know, he spoke about how he introduced the wow factor, this terminology called the wow factor. It's called walking on water syndrome, you know,
Okay.
where certain individuals in this country think that they can walk on water without any repercussions of their actions. So when you get a situation like this, where a high-profile trial with all the evidence that is being adduced and suddenly it just disappears into thin air,
Right.
you are enforcing this wow factor on people, these people who consider themselves untouchables. So, you know, what is the kind of message that is being sent out there? So the Attorney General should be held accountable and he should explain. So just to clear the air when it comes
Right.
to cases like this.
I mean, obviously, it has to go beyond what his response was just recently, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that is just leaving it half like,
Correct.
okay, that's not my problem because, well, I'm acting within the rule of the law.
But again, as Dato' Jahabuddin said, you know, we are not questioning the decision to drop cases, you know, because it happens almost every other day in courts around the country. We should not just hold one particular case involving a high-profile individual and things like that. You know, it is not about that individual or that particular case, but an explanation just needs to be forthcoming, as was done previously, so that you can clear the air,
Right,
make
yes,
people
yes.
understand where, how, and what happened. Yeah.
Right.
In that context, if I can give an example of another institution, you may notice that in the past year, 2 years, SPRM under Tan Sri Azam Baki, he often has press conferences to explain matters.
Correct.
And that really is very helpful and that clears the air.
Yeah.
That's a good culture that SPRM is practicing, you know. So those are kind of things. I think we have to move with the times. The law is a law, but at the same time, how do I engage with the public? You know, what do I tell the public? How do I articulate to the public
Okay.
to make them understand that, you know, there are public interest elements, because of this we have to withdraw the charges, so on and so forth. And the public will understand. As Charlie is saying, at the end of the day, what is important is the perception in high-profile cases.
It's just that it seems like when you have these high-profile cases, and then you hear that so and so politician has 47 corruption charges leveled against him, and suddenly they're dropped. It seems like it's an unpopular move, for then, and it kind of reflects, in some ways, unfortunately, reflects the justice system as a whole, and that would include the judiciary. But it does reflect, like, oh, this seems to be a pattern. We've seen this before. Multiple charges, corruption charges, criminal charges, dropped. And then, I can see where the frustration is coming from, or why people are frustrated. How do we manage this then? I mean, it's going to, like you said, this is common. We're only hearing this because it involves prominent politicians. But how can we manage this then?
Okay. I have a response to that. And my response may not be popular, because my response, I think, goes to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is in this country, in our beloved Malaysia, we politicize everything. Religion, politicize.
Right.
Judiciary, politicize. Prosecution, politicize. Corruption, politicize. But what I mean is, politicians, we have said that everything is connected to politics. So what we need to do is, we need to address this issue of, are indeed the judiciary, the AGC, the MACC, are they indeed politicized? We have to address this issue. We cannot just sweep it under the carpet. So we must be courageous, honest enough, and intellectual enough to address it. And the manner to address it, as I mentioned earlier, was number one is there must be constant engagement with the public by the respective officials, number one. Number two is there must be adherence to the law. Number three, there must be punishments meted out to those who keep on undermining these institutions.
Right. Yep.
So we are not doing that. I mean, I'm an advocate of thinking and compassion. I'm an advocate of free speech.
Yep.
But at the same time, we must balance it with ensuring the reputation of these institutions are not tarnished. by irresponsible politicians. I'm sorry to say that.
Yeah.
The other thing is the public also needs to understand that judicial decisions or decisions made whether to prosecute or not to prosecute someone is not based on popularity. Judicial decisions cannot be made to weigh in social or political ramifications. It must be based purely on the rule of law. You know, so the public needs to understand this too. You know, when certain decisions are made, just because they are going to be unpopular or they're going to have an impact on the social or political ramification, so those responsible should not do it. You know, we need to be fair to the accused and the person that is going to be prosecuted too.
Correct. Yep. So just before we move on, we wrap this up and move on to the second segment, I'd like to invite both of you, if you can, as a close to this discussion, what else do you think needs to be addressed in managing this? Reputation of the integrity is, coming to question now, the integrity of the judiciary, and how do we placate or how do we manage the frustrations among
So
the
I
public?
think the situation has reached the point where I think the accountability and credibility of the institution is at stake if arbitrary decisions like this are made. The only way to address this is to be clearer, to be more open, to be more accountable.
Yes.
I guess the first steps toward that would be to explain.
And that responsibility befalls mostly, number one, on the AG, on the part of the prosecution, but also on the politicians themselves, people who are being, brought to under the spotlight for things that they might have done wrong,
As a conclusion, I will say this, Azwin. Number one is the politicians, especially the lawmakers, should realize the significance and impact of what they say. For example, when they say that, hey, this is political persecution against me, what are they saying? Do they understand what they're saying? To me, what they're saying is they are saying that the executive, some politician in power, is abusing the institution, AG's chambers, and SPRM, and using this as a tool to prosecute the person. That means when a leader says, when a politician says that this is political persecution, he's actually blaming and tarnishing the image of AGC and the agency involved.
Yep.
So that's the first thing they must realize. And I am very disappointed. Why are we not taking action against them if it is untrue? If the allegations are untrue, then action must be taken against them. If it's true, then we got to re-investigate our own prosecution and our own MACC. Maybe people of no integrity are there. So what I'm saying, either way, we have to address it. So if you keep remaining, it builds up. The lack of confidence in the judiciary, the lack of confidence in the institutions builds up. So that's the first one. Now, second thing is that we need to be, people need to wake up to know that the young generation today, with internet, with social media and so on and so forth, people want to be told as what exactly the situation. So if you want to uphold the rule of law, for example, the AGC, for example, then in certain cases, high-profile cases, they need to an extra explanation, like what Tan Sri Azam Bakis are doing for MACC.
Yeah.
So these two things. But first of all is you got to address, to me, Hazwin, the best way to solve a problem is to admit there's a problem, address it. Then the solution will come automatically.
There's a saying, if you don't explain, it shows that you can't explain.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Dato'
Okay.
Sri, for coming on for today. That was a really insightful discussion. Certainly, I learned a lot. And Sharanjit, it's wonderful to have you on the couch in the studio here, Beyond the Headline studio. We are going to come back later on in a bit for our second segment with Sharon Kaur in just a bit. Now on to the property market. I have Sharon and our guest, real estate strategist Pravindran Singhe, for this segment of the show. Pravin is a business and real estate strategist with strong track records in leading and driving property companies and marketing excellence programs. He is a seasoned C-suite executive with 33 years of international real estate experience in Malaysia, Vietnam, and the UK. He has also led and managed teams of up to 100 talents across multiple work streams in Malaysia. Pravin, welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Really great to have you on the show. Now, Sharon, I'd like to hand this over to you. This is well within your domain.
Thanks, Haswin.
Please.
Welcome, Praveen.
Take it away.
It's a pleasure to have you here. We have some questions for you, and I will start with the first question.
Sure.
So, how has the COVID-19 pandemic influenced buying and selling patterns in the property market in Malaysia?
So the market actually showed very promising recovery from the time of COVID and as the country entered into its endemic situation. In terms of buying and selling patterns, I think buyers now are more conscious of what COVID actually led them to, from the work from home situation, and also the fact that family matters, space matters. So I think a lot of the buying decision, especially for home buyers, have really been focused into what kind of products, design, and location actually allows them to, in event it happens again, or now there's more. How do you say? People cherish their space in the family a little bit more post that. So I think all the purchasing decision is really much focused onto that. Yep.
Okay. And how do you see the economic climate affecting our key states? As usual, it's always Kuala Lumpur, Selangor, Johor,
Yep.
and Penang, right?
Yep.
So moving forward, how do you see these four markets performing? And do you see a pickup in like other states as well, like Terengganu, Kelantan?
Sure. So the markets actually showed fantastic recovery last year. I think this was driven mainly by the strong demand in the residential market, and also by the growth in the industrial logistic warehouse market. That the boom in the e-commerce sector actually created very strong demand in the logistic warehouse, and also Malaysia has now positioned itself as a strong manufacturing base as well. If you have a chance, please head up to Kulim, and you'd actually see how many factories are actually coming up and really fueling the demand, and the same can be said in the southern states as well. So that plus the general economic improvement. We've seen improvement in Malaysia. We've seen FDIs coming in, and that has also fueled a strong economic recovery, which indirectly, really gets the property market going. Right. Now, in terms of the states, I think Penang is actually seeing a very strong boom driven by the industrial sector, the logistics sector, the warehousing sector, and with that, definitely there's a spillover into the other support services, etc. You can't just build these factories without providing accommodation. So a new asset class such as workers' accommodation has also come up. That's a big asset class in the market. And that plus residential supporting services. So Penang, yes, I find it very strong. In terms of on the other side of the peninsula, on south, Johor is experiencing very strong demand. I think with the RTS coming into play, with the two governments having very good cordial relationship as we saw last week, that plus the impending coronation of our new king, I think that's really fueling a lot of positive sentiments in Johor. Right, so obviously the first impact would be Iskandar Puteri region. I think that's the region that's really going to get a lot of demand, and I think developers, buyers, investors are already going there. Right, I think if you not just me, I'm sure if you read all the reports that are coming out, you'd see that there's a lot of activity coming out of Johor. In terms of Klang Valley, yes, financial center, administrative center, capital city, good demand. Residential markets are good. Not all sectors here. I think the pricing of 700,000, 800,000, and especially if you get landed tough, but that price range in Klang Valley is really very strong. On the other states, from Penang, you'd see the spillover into Sungai Petani, into Kulim, into Gurun. I think definitely you're going to see some activity taking place there. Likewise with Perak. Sorry, guys.
That's
My
fine.
apologies. So sorry.
Happens.
And you'd also see the spillover into Perak as well. I think certain hotspots, I think Ipoh is a very strong hotspot. I think there are plans for the Lumut port that might actually take
Right.
up. I think Tanjung Malim with Proton City, I think
Yeah.
everybody's waiting to
Waiting
see
to see what's happening.
what's happening.
Yeah.
Don't forget, ECRL is coming into play, right? So I do see the two ends of the lines, Kuantan and Port Klang, right? Because of the interport services with strong demand from China. And I think, what's really happening in the global geopolitical situation in Red Sea and Suez, I think our ports would really
Right.
benefit. So I think there's going to be some spillover from that into Kuantan as well. Yeah,
Okay.
I do see. Don't underestimate Sabah and Sarawak. I think the strong initiatives by the Sarawak government is going to really bear fruit in terms of the real estate investments. In Sabah, obviously, is driven by the tourism market. But as strong as the tourism is, the spillover is also going to be there. You need to house people. You need to have
Yeah.
amenities for them. You need commercial activities for the tourism market as well. So that would be a short roundup of all the states. Yeah.
That's good. Praveen, what do you think about the Johor market? It's been rather slow in the last 4 years, and there's been a lot of stories about Forest City and then the Danga Bay area, And as you mentioned earlier, the government has announced a lot of infrastructure projects,
Yep.
RTS, and hopefully the high-speed rail does materialize.
Yep.
And what do you see the trend currently in just the Johor market? Because we see a lot of companies looking at data centers.
Yep.
It's like a big investment going into
Yep.
Johor for that.
Yeah.
So
So other than the worker accommodation market, I think data center is really the hot asset class at the moment, And, by fact that there was a moratorium in Singapore for no more data centers there, and that has created the strong demand in Johor, and with the ample power supply that we have, I think that's really driving the data center business. And it's strong, it's big, It's
Yeah.
something you shouldn't underestimate in terms of the size. But when you ask about questions on what's at Danga Bay and Forest City, I think it really needs economic impetus. So I think the special economic zone would really make a change. But obviously, we need to see what are the initiatives, right? The initiatives need to actually drive demand, drive economic activity to actually see the demand take place. I think the initial idea of Forest City was excellent, but I think COVID, the changes in MM2H, the global economic situation, I think, it's probably resulted in that. So I do see things picking up, but, at what pace is probably we have to be worried about. Notwithstanding those two, there's a really positive changes. They are good developments. I think if you do go down, there are pockets of success stories you can look at, right? Sunway City would be one of them. Putri Harbour needs a little bit of rejuvenation, but it's there. The infrastructure is fantastic. Senibong Cove. So there are pockets of great activity in Johor, which I think is fantastic. Yeah.
So moving forward, what are the potential challenges or opportunities for real estate investors in, let's say, the next 2 years?
I think biggest challenge is the global headwinds, right? I've said it a couple of times. I'm really worried about the impact of the shadow financing in China. They've only one company, and it's a huge amount, right? I think 60 billion or something like that. So that's worrying for me because the last Asian financial crisis stemmed from a financial situation, right? So this shadow financing, if there's some more skeletons in the closet, that's really worrying for me. And even if you look at Xi Jinping's New Year speech, right? He is also very cautious. So that is one headwind that I'm a bit worried about. The geopolitical wars, yes, I just hope it doesn't escalate further. I already think with, what's happening at the Red Sea and the canal, I think we're probably going to have some short-term supply chain issues. I think inflation's probably going to kick in. Those are all going to impact. It's going to. That's a big headwind, right? But I don't. Probably interest rates. I'd love to see the interest rates
Rates,
drop,
right.
but I think, most of the banks are, Bank Negara has maintained the OPR, which is great, but
Yeah.
I think, big challenge for purchasers have always been the interest rate, or even for developers, right?
Right.
Your finance costs is increasing, right?
Yeah.
So those would be my main headwinds that I think would be facing.
I think in terms of interest rate, the president of the Malaysian Institute of Estate Agents, MIEA president Tian Kian Aun. I hope I'm saying his name
Yes,
correctly there.
it is.
So he has applauded the government for improving the investment climate in Malaysia, for taking more proactive steps in lowering interest rates. He says that, as you just briefly mentioned, you touched on, there's a lower interest rate now, currently at 3%, and I think BNM has maintained it at that.
Yes.
How is this good news then for the rest of us? I mean, in terms of, other than more of an attracting more investors, as an appeal to more of an appeal to investors, what does it mean for the rest of us looking to perhaps buy property?
Yeah, so generally your cost of investment reduces, right? So, with a higher interest rate, you'd probably be paying 1,008 per month.
Right.
With a lower interest rate, you'd probably be paying 1,003 a month. 500 ringgit makes a big difference in a lot of household homes. So I think a lower interest rate, so that's one, right, where it impacts us directly. Indirectly is the cost of the property itself, because the developers are incurring higher interest rates as well. And developers are not going to absorb it. They will transfer it to you, right? If it's
Yes.
in a good location, a property that you want, a developer would impute all that cost as they would, right? And you would be paying a higher amount. If it was cheaper cost of financing, then it's generally you're going to see that the prices would be lower, right? But it impacts every business, right? Because from the whole supply chain of the construction, they are probably having loans as well. Cost of business drops when there's a drop in the interest rates. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you see interest rates actually affecting the affordability rates for home buyers, first-time home buyers?
So I believe that there should be a special rate. There should be two special rates here. Yeah. Number one is definitely a rate for first home buyers. I think there needs to be a special package for first home buyers, where the first 5-10 years it's a reduced interest rate, and then it carries on. A second is with regards to low-cost homes or affordable homes. Let's look at the low-cost homes where a lot of the cost is always transferred to the developer, right? I think it's about time the banks step up, and the banks also take responsibility, because you say everybody needs to buy a low-cost home or an affordable home. You transfer the cost to the developer, but the bank is still charging 4%, 5%, yet announcing 4 billion profits, 3 billion profits. I think there's got to be a deft balance between shareholders' returns and really walking the talk about getting things done in the country, right?
Yeah.
It's an ecosystem anyway, right? So I think that's got to be something needs to be addressed on that structural issue. You can't be just getting one part of the ecosystem only taking the hit, Yeah.
So what would you advise first-time home buyers?
First-time
If they're
home
looking- yeah.
buyers, research. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
In some of the talks or even the articles I write, I always make the decision based on where you think your social support is and your place of work, etc. Right? Social support very important. We as Malaysians, either we are supporting our parents will be supporting us in terms of our kids, or we need to look after them, or they need to look after us. So I think that social circle thing is very important, close access in terms of location, right? Then of course where you work, etc. But research is very important. I think research in the location, research in the developer, research in the product, research on the price. You need to spend time and go through the research. And it's so good now that everything's available online, right? In the click of a button, you're going to get a lot of answers. So that would be my advice. And it's just not about the real estate portion, also about your loan, right? Do a lot of research on your loans. Should you take a fixed term loan, or should you take a variable interest loan,
Right.
So a fixed interest loan or a variable interest loan. So things like that. I would tell them to spend a lot of time Don't just go with the herd, put the money in, and suddenly.
And go with the trends.
Just do a lot of research.
So things are looking up for buyers, right? Things are looking up in general for people looking to invest and buy property.
It is still a buyer's market.
Right.
Right. I think for me, good time because interest rates are low, and it's a buyer's market. I mean, you
Right.
go out there, whether it's from the secondary market, which have a lot of properties for sale, or whether it's the primary market where you can have so many developers launching. I think it's a great time for buyers. Especially first-time buyers, right?
Does that also spell well for renters? What about the renters market?
So we have seen a trend, maybe an uptick in the past 6 to 7 months. I think it's in the more slightly more premium locations where occupiers are outpriced to purchase. We find that rentals are really going up. Especially the good locations. I mean, I'll give you an example in Taman Tun. In the early days, maybe even 2-3 years ago, terrace house you'd probably be renting at 2.5, but now you can't get anything below 3.5, right? Because they're either outpriced and they're willing to pay more for the rental because they want to be in the location. So I see this rental picking up in landed, in condos, in suburban locations. Right? It's really good. So I think that might drive the investor market back into the market. Yeah.
Sounds great.
So what are the current trends in the property market? And also, the sought after features and what buyers are actually looking for today, and are developers actually catering to that?
Yes, I think, you'd be surprised on how well-researched developers are. I mean, we've done surveys for them. We've done surveys for ourselves. In one of our latest surveys we did for condo living, right? Preferred sizes are, about 1,002. A lot of them drive, so car park is needed. But as much as they drive, they want proximity to public transport. More than 70% want proximity to public transport or access to public transport. But, when we did the research, obviously security is key. Second is swimming pool. I can't remember. I think the third was amenities, close by to amenities. Fourth was tennis courts. Right?
Is there a pickup on playing tennis?
So I think there's a pickup on a healthy lifestyle.
Healthy lifestyle.
Because
Right.
another one of the features that they wanted was running trail or cycling trail. Right, and we also then, with that kind of research, we also were saying that there's got to be place for bike racks, or the lifts need to be able to facilitate for the bikes, so do the rooms. So yes, I think developers already are. I think they're way ahead of the curve in terms of thinking of what facilities or things to put in. I think not just tennis, even pickleball or even paddle was also mentioned in the survey. Right, so as much as occupiers are interested, I think developers are already facilitating these requirements. Yeah. But that's just very general, Sharon.
Right.
I think there are a lot of other things people look at as well.
I think that the other features will be like landscape, wheelchair facilities.
For sure.
Yeah.
All those, even the whole ESG movement, right? So people are also conscious because loans get cheaper, so they also want to go to a place where the building is either green certified or the developer is certified, so they can get cheaper loans.
So you mentioned ESG, right? What's
Yes.
your take on ESG, and do you think this is an important thing that all developers should actually look at?
So yes, I mean, for me, for sure, I really am a proponent of ESG. I think there's two school of thoughts. One says, look, it's a waste of time. It's something that's professed by the funds, etc. But so it goes, right? And if you look at how the banks and the regulators, Bursa is already saying that all of you all need to report already by 2025. The banks, I think 50% of their loan portfolio have to be green portfolio, right? So I think it's here to stay, whether you want it or not. But I'm a strong proponent. I think enough damage has been done already. I think whatever we can do, we should do now. I think our generation would probably be the only generation to be able to save. It might be too late on the decisions we make for even the next generation. I think it's going to be tough, right? So I think more than just a reporting requirement, I think doing it properly, which I have fortunate incident to see one of my manufacturing clients, never thought about reporting, never thought about doing anything, but he just wanted to save the environment, and in his plant, it's a huge plant. He started drilling wells so he doesn't have to use water, started rainwater. I mean, this was maybe 10, 15 years ago, but because he did see the damage to the environment, right? So I think, if we don't do it, my altruistic side is telling me it's going to be hard. I really think, and we are experiencing it. Look at the rain, look at the weather that we are experiencing now. It's here. Yeah.
It hit Johor pretty badly,
Yes.
I have to say, yeah.
It is.
Does that,
It is.
do any damage to the
Yes. So
outlook?
now when you do your ESG assessment, you need to already look at your risk
Right,
assessment,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which of my assets has a high risk profile? What am I going to do to those assets with a high risk profile? Because your shareholders will want to know that as well, right? So when you start doing your ESG assessment, then you need to look at all this, right, on the environmental part of it, because whether your assets are in an environmental risky location, etc., right? Not just Johor. I mean, if just seeing what the rain is doing now, I'm just worried what's going to happen middle of the year. Are we going to get into a drought? And whether it's going to be extreme. I mean, look at the Arctic blast in the US now. I mean, unheard of, right?
Right.
So, are there any emerging real estate markets that investors should be keeping an eye on?
Yes, as I mentioned, I think the data center market,
center,
I think investors are keen, right? We might not be a very advanced market. I think the data center trend was maybe 3, 4, 5 years coming in. So it needs to mature a little bit more, but I think investors are coming. We are getting requests for, any data centers available, right? So I think that's one investment class. I think workers' accommodation is the next big thing. As I said, if you see the size of some of the manufacturing estates or the industrial estates, you already need to, and with our Act 463, I think, if I'm not mistaken, which governs the workers' quarters, etc. So we already need to comply, and that's part of ESG. You can't get yourself certified, or you can't sell your stuff to Europe if you do not comply to all this, right? So I think that's the next asset class. I do see a big shift, big demand in the medical and wellness sector.
Okay.
I think people want to buy hospitals, not necessarily run it. They probably want to own the asset, but I do see hybrid as well, right, where they own 100% of the asset and maybe 40% of the operating company, right? So I do see.
What's particularly appealing to these buyers?
Why to the medical?
Why would they want to buy
strong
over
demand? So
hospitals?
as the country gets a little bit more, as we all get, the population get more money, right? They can spend a little bit more on themselves, on the medical care, on the medical service, right? So some operators might want to go asset light and say, hey, I don't want to own the real estate. I only want to focus on operating because that's what I do, right? So the investors are coming and saying, hey, these guys are doing great business. They'll be fantastic tenants for me, right? So why don't I come and purchase the real estate, sale and lease back, or some kind of operation? Or even some people are saying, as you can see, even in Bangsa South, I'll build it, I'll get an operator, but we run it together, right? So they take both the risk, the operating risk and the asset risk. So I see medical and wellness one. With that comes the assisted living. We are also an aging population. We're getting there, right? So I think that's also going to be another.
It's interesting you just brought this up, because I recently came across an advertisement of, I think it was an abandoned hotel, or used to be a hotel, a dilapidated hotel rather, and they redeveloped it into an old age living facility.
Yeah, the one in Klang.
If I'm not mistaken, yes. And
yes,
it looks
yeah.
really good. I mean, I definitely put down money for myself.
At 8,000 ringgit a month, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
They take full care of you, your rent sorted, your food sorted. I mean, it's expensive, but I think there's going to be, so that's starting at the, higher level. But I think we will going to see, limited service kind of, where it's still aged care, but not necessarily with all the bells and the whistles, right? So I think the whole aged care thing is going to really pick up as well, right? And I think that could be a strong asset class in Johor.
Yeah, certainly
right?
looks like it.
Yes, I think that might be because the spillover from Singapore.
Right.
It could really pick up if there's a great concept going on. Yep. So these would be the new asset classes I'd probably see is
I really hate to have to cut this short, but we are sort of very close to the end. Anything that you want to touch on before we
Just
close
on
it
the
off?
commercial,
Yes.
my favorite topic, the
Okay.
commercial market, right? How do you see the commercial market doing in terms of
Okay,
across the board?
so-
We have more buildings coming up, right? So a lot of companies, a lot of people say there's oversupply. So what's your take on this, you know?
Okay, so let's just break down the commercial sector a little bit. A lot of people in the market, astute investors, are investing in the commercial market, especially the shop office market, right? Going from the traditional, let me buy a bungalow, they're saying, let me buy a shop office in Taman Tun or Bangsa or Damansara Heights, because the quality of tenant can be better. And those people tend to stay longer if they're running business. Imagine, one of the shops in Bangsa, you've got a long-standing tenant. So they're looking at that. So that sector, and there is a lot of interest in that sector in the market. Now, coming to your question on the office market, yes, I think we're all a bit concerned on the oversupply of the office market. However, the biggest losers are going to be the buildings that haven't stayed relevant, right? I don't like to use the word old buildings because don't forget the Twin Towers is 26 years this year, yet it's still very relevant because they maintain it and it's still kept up with a lot of things, right? So all the older buildings that haven't stayed relevant, I think they're really going to they're going to suffer, because every tenant, every RFP we get from a tenant who's looking for office space, first thing is any green features.
Okay.
Number 2, proximity to public transport. Number 3, amenities, right? So there's going to be a flight to quality, right? The older irrelevant buildings are going to suffer. What will happen is these buildings will either need to spend that kind of money to catch up, which might not be practical. So most of them will repurpose, right? And I think we've already seen the repurpose happening. Some of the buildings converting to hotels.
Yeah.
Some, I think even Time.com bought an office building to convert to a data center,
Yeah.
right? So there could be repurposing of these office buildings, right? But it's a lot. I think the good thing is that economic activity's picked up, so there's a strong demand in the office space now, right? But I don't think it can match up the supply that's coming into the market.
I think there are a lot of old buildings in KL City Centre.
Yes,
so,
they are. Yeah, they are. Yeah, I think more than 40-50% would be,
yeah.
25 years and
25
older.
years,
Yeah.
So what will happen to these buildings moving
Yeah,
forward?
so as I said, they'll
They
probably
have
be
to
repurposed or,
repurpose and-
either, designed to catch up, or if they're under plot ratio, probably knocked down and redeveloped,
Right.
to what we don't know, right? That'll depend on the market
Well,
study.
the
and,
turning it into an
Yes.
old age facility,
Yes.
living facility
Among-
is
among-
one
yes.
way I can
or
see.
even
yeah.
affordable accommodation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Could be
yeah.
smaller, not so much shoebox, but maybe a slightly bigger box, right?
And what about shopping malls? There's so many shopping malls
Yes,
coming up.
I think, again, being relevant is very important. The good thing is there was an uptick in retail sales, right? I think we really need to work on our airports and airlines to really bring traffic back into Malaysia. We were such a shopping destination, right? But people can't access us now. There's just not enough flights. You can't fly from Scandinavia here. If I'm stopping in Dubai, why would I want to come here? Right? It's just a direct. But if I had a direct flight, then we're a great destination, right? So I think we probably need to relook at what our airports can offer to airlines that can fly directly, or even what our airlines should be doing in order to support Malaysia's tourism, shopping, right? It's a big thing, Sharon. I think in the good heydays, 30% of the retail revenue were from foreigners.
Yeah.
Right, so I think we seriously need to look into that. Maybe another day to discuss on what luxury tax is going to
Please,
do.
yeah.
Yeah,
Whenever we have
very
time,
easy.
come back, please.
But I think I'm not so concerned on the retail. Right, there will be casualties. There already are, but I think it's you can already see the retail market. The evolution of the retail market already, right? TRX is just taken us just to a different level, and which is good for us.
Yeah.
It's good for the market. Market will need to elevate itself further.
Right.
Yeah.
But generally, just positive outlook for the year, I think.
Yes, I would be
Yeah.
cautiously optimistic. I still think we must not forget the headwinds that we'll be facing. I've shared what's happening on the ground,
Right.
but I think we need to be very cautious on what's happening. I'm really worried about, as I said, the shadow financing
Right.
situation and the geopolitical drama that's taking place. Yeah.
Property mantra previously was location, location, and location. What is it today?
I wouldn't go far from that.
From that,
I
okay.
think the first two would still be location, your
Location.
macro location, your micro location. The third would be product, I think, for
Product.
me. I think product is key.
Right.
And with product comes developer,
Okay.
the type of unit or whatever you're buying, the whole product concept, right? But the first macro, the second micro still works.
Okay.
But the third, I think, would be product.
Okay, didn't want to cut you off there because we
No
had a
worries.
really good conversation going
Yeah,
then
it's
to the end.
fantastic,
Yeah, but yeah, sure, please come back anytime, Pravin. To all our viewers at home or from wherever you're watching this video right now, thank you so much for tuning in this week again. If you like this episode, do give us a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel at NST Online. Don't forget to also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter or X at NST Online for more news and updates. Till next time, this is goodbye from me, Hazmi Hassan. Thank you.